But speaking of the online league, in case you haven't heard, the CDL did make a statement this past Thursday saying the health and safety of employees, fans, players, teams, and partners is paramount to Activision Blizzard Esports. We are continuing to closely monitor COVID-19 city-level recommendations and mandates and all guidelines set forth by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. After careful review and working in close collaboration with our teams, we are shifting all currently shifted 2020 Call of Duty League live events to online-only competition, effective immediately. For details on previously ticketed events, please visit host team websites and follow their social channels. The new online-only matches will be broadcast live to fans. Dates will be announced shortly, along with tune-in details. Call of Duty League has seen firsthand the power of our live events in our inaugural season and will return to city-based competition in front of live audiences as soon as it's safe and logistically possible. In the interim, Call of Duty League is confident it will continue to deliver fans what they want, amazing competition between the best players competing at the highest level for the right to be considered the greatest team on Earth. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't really all that shocked by the release. I saw quite a few people commenting that this was not the right time to do it. They should have put the CDL on pause, much like a lot of other sports leagues, and resumed later. However, that isn't logistically possible, right? This is the only direction you could have gone with this. From an event perspective, renting out these spaces is a very large scale operation. You've got a ton of moving pieces, from location to staff to players to audience, vendors, etc. The list goes on. Booking events and venues is done months in advance, and the weight and pressure of canceling an event last second is worth avoiding at all costs, especially if you don't want to go in the red. Now, you have to be careful, though, in the wording with this one here in the release. And I may be jumping on something that doesn't necessarily exist, but in the press release it does say, and I quote, "It will return to city-based competition in front of live audiences as soon as it is safe and logistically possible." Earlier in the statement, it also explains that they are currently shifting all scheduled live events to online competition. But in my opinion, this is realistically keeping the door open for champs. I think that's what this is. I think the wording kind of makes it seem as if that's the case because, and we didn't know the exact dates of champs, but you'd like to assume it would be after the last event in Toronto, would be around the time of July. Champs was supposed to take place, at least in my eyes, in July. Obviously, we're learning more about the virus daily, but there are currently a lot of reports talking about July being the time where many things could start to resume. Keeping in mind that is what currently we know. Things could change, obviously. But that's just kind of where my head is as of right now. I think a very solid majority of the season will be online. However, if things do go the way they sound like it and based off experts' opinions, champs is still a very real possibility to be on land, because online it wouldn't be the greatest situation, obviously, and I think that would be a totally different conversation that we would have if that happens to be the case. Now, although we currently know, and based on the rumored format released by Slasher, which I'll read a little bit of, is that Activision Blizzard is currently working with team owners across the CDL and OWL to possibly reschedule games throughout the week, although he does go on to mention that nothing as of now has been finalized. You know, it really is a shame because I loved the format that we were doing with the CDL. I really started to have worries not long after the original schedule was released because event-based tournaments were announced and it was solely league matches. I just felt like they really nailed it. And I think that even other esports are going to, in the future, look at what the CDL did and say, you know what, that may be the system to adapt to. Even regular sports leagues, NBA has talked about for the longest of time, and as of recently, been saying, hey, you know what, it'd be kind of cool if we had a mid-season tournament, right? It'd be very cool if we kind of did that. There's been a lot of speculation that maybe in the future that could be something that they adapt to, especially if their season is put on pause for a very long time. But like I said, I just feel like they really nailed it, and it is unfortunate, the fact that obviously everything kind of has to be put on pause for right now and have to go to an online league format, of which we're still waiting to hear what exactly occurs with that. But I'll be real with you, and we can touch on this more at a later time as information is revealed more, but I worry about the logistics of this change, fully in realization that this was the only option that could have been really out there. But at first, just solely due to the publicity of a franchised esport being affected, it'll draw eyes, right? Everyone's at home. People are wanting to watch what has kind of been a very interesting subject matter as of recent. But I worry about the weight and the lack of excitement behind league matches. Because it would be different if we didn't have this before, right? It would be different if we didn't have a great format that was on LAN, in front of a venue crowd, for a championship. It would be different if something wasn't taken away. I just hope that the CDL was working to make sure that these future problems, or rather future changes, are properly addressed, because I just don't see the hype nor the excitement really being there. And I don't think that all these storylines as well are going to translate that well to an online league. We talked about the biggest storyline as of this moment, Atlanta FaZe versus Chicago Huntsmen. Who wins that? What happens if it's just week 4 of a random pro league? It's not really all that weighty, right? There's not a championship on the line. There's not storylines really all coming into that. I mean, it'll be a hype match, don't get me wrong, but if it's a pro league game, it kind of sets the tone off a little bit. But the biggest deal with all of this, and the reason why online league matches are easier than, say, tournament online matches that also could be a possibility, are online attacks. Right? If you have pretty much 2 days set apart like you did when it came down to LAN, what happens if you have to deal with online attacks? Right? What happens if something goes down? Internet problems obviously arise. What happens then at that moment? Does the tournament get put on pause? What happens if matches have already occurred? A lot of problems could easily take place there. And this is something that needs to be addressed before the league fires back up, is we need, for the level of competition that we're going to see from LAN, the best way possible translate to online, meaning dedicated servers, better overall connection when it comes down to custom lobbies, protection against DDoS attacks, etc. The ability to pause games mid-match online for possible lag outs, things like that. Now, I'm sure pros, organizations have probably already addressed this to the league. This is something that instantly came into my mind, and obviously is going to affect those players, the organizations as well. Especially because we've gone through this previously with DDoS attacks, etc. But this has to be handled properly, right? You're going to have players scattered all throughout the United States. Precautions must be in play and properly addressed for the online league to be successful and for it to carry on what has previously been, which was a well-structured LAN tournament league. Now, I've also heard the recommendations of pre-recorded CDL matches, which actually sounds great in theory from a, I guess you could say from the CDL's point of view, but this is my problem with what could be pre-recorded matches, because we've had this discussion before in the past many years ago when online was a factor, but results could easily be leaked, right? Despite precautions being taken, this could allow for betting to obviously cause a problem when it comes into CDL matches, which is its own issue totally. It also kind of takes away from the live element. Eventually, if you try to act as if it's live, people are going to figure it out. You're going to have that one pro who accidentally turns on his live stream while he's playing a CDL match. You're going to have a pro accidentally tweet out a GIF or tweet something in the middle of a match. It's going to happen. There is no way that you can kind of get away from that. It will be leaked at some point if these are pre-recorded. And it's going to take away from the live element, right? The one thing that at least you have with online is that it's live. You get to watch the reactions in real time. You get to react with the rest of these players. You're feeling the emotions of what currently is taking place, and that goes away with matches that are pre-recorded. Now, there have been a lot of people talking about how they're excited to see things kind of go back to the old school feel of how Call of Duty used to be with the online league. But there is a reason why LAN was so heavily requested back in the day. I remember the tweets. I remember the Reddit threads. The requests every pro player had was just let the league be on LAN. Just allow the league to be played in a LAN environment. That is all we ask. I remember some players saying, I don't even care if it's a good game. Just put the league on LAN. And the idea of an online league, it kind of sounds cool. I get it. Right? I get the idea of changing things up a little bit. I understand it. Trust me, the right precautions and preparation need to be in play before we all get excited about this. Because if not, problems can start to occur, because I worry that switching will affect the mentality of not just the fans, but for the players themselves. Granted, it is their only form of competition, but still the same applies. Also, let me address something, because I realize the online league, and I said it a minute ago, but I'll say it again, was the only option available. The idea of delaying the league until further notice, I don't believe would have been a sound one. It's an unfortunate circumstance that's simply, at this moment, unavoidable. I want the audience to know that as well, because players just can't play without a crowd. That still involves the idea of travel and puts people and players at risk, and that just can't happen. Well, I believe the online league by no means is the greatest alternative. It happens to be the only one that we have, and we have to make the best of it. And at the very least, we can in some ways be excited the fact that, hey, at least matches aren't canceled. At least the CDL still gets to go on. That's the beauty of esports. But it still in some ways is going to be hard to deal with, and a lot of precautions, like I said, need to be in place for this to be a successful thing. Because this affects a lot more than people think. It affects all the stuff we talked about on top of things like roster changes. In fact, we've already seen a few teams begin to make roster changes.